virtualization, para-virtualization, and emulation. Where full virtualization is is the technology where you completely virtualize your hardware, and the entire onus of virtualization comes onto your virtualization software or hypervisor. Hypervisor is something I'll get into later. Whereas para-virtualization is a slightly older method of virtualization now, where partial resources is handled by this virtualization software and partially is handled by your base hardware and operating system. And emulation, of course, a simple example of emulation is if in the good old days Mac had a product called Virtual PC where you could run Windows XP as a small application within Mac. So, and that's a very basic example of emulation, but this method is no longer much prevalent and hardly being used now. So we're coming down to most common examples and most well-known examples of virtualization software companies are, of course, VMware. There is Microsoft Hyper-V. There is Citrix with Zen Server. There is Red Hat has a product called RHEV. And these are the most common virtualization software companies. I guess between VMware, Microsoft Hyper-V, and Citrix Zen Server, you could easily assume 80 to 85% of the virtualization industry runs these three. And they've been doing it very well, and a lot of inroads have been made over the years with the software. Coming forward, I'm sorry, just give me a minute. Oh, this stuck. All right, this is a small diagram representing the two different main types of virtualization. That's para-virtualization and full virtualization, wherein the example over here is, if you see the bottom layer, the MMU is your hardware. That's the server, the physical server, which has a CPU, memory. This space, of course, we'll get into later. And well as, so there's a layer, like in this case, the Zen VM, which is virtual machine monitor, the Zen hypervisor, on top of which lies the guest OS. And so this is para-virtualization, where there is not much offload onto the direct hardware, considering that all read writes, operations, everything is taken back to your hardware resources, and the software, all it does is doing a basic validation based on the rule sets that you've applied to it. Coming to full virtualization, this is the main one, where your hardware is completely segregated through the software layer from your virtual machines. Everything is handled by the software, by your VMM. This is what provides. There's a lot of rules which can be applied. There's a lot of different methodologies which you can apply in this. And going forth, this is at the heart of the server-based virtualization lies the hypervisor, which is the code set, the actual code set which handles virtualization, which takes your physical resources and contains efficiently the like I have said, the hypervisors are very minimal in size. They're hardly 700 MB to a GB in most cases. Of course, they do tend to look bigger because the hypervisor comes with a service OS on which the hypervisor is based, which is a service console also it's called. These kind of, you can say, work to around 4 to 5 GB with various vendors, but predominantly they're just a service console. So it's just a console where if you need to log into and run certain hypervisor related commands, so it provides you that interface. All right. But the key thing is your hypervisor. In fact, now there are certain companies where you can actually, if you have a USB port on your server, you can load your hypervisor on a USB port and and run virtualization through that. So it's highly extremely flexible and extremely easily manageable. Alright, so the best part about virtualization and full virtualization especially is that you can do resource allocation such as CPU, memory, disk space. It can be done on the fly. In fact, most latest operating systems, you don't even need to shut down your virtual machine. I could just go in the back end and say, suppose I wanted to add 2 more cores to a existing virtual machine. I can go in the back end, suppose it's existing 2, I can add 2 more, make it 4. I can add 4 or 5 GB more memory, and of course disk space, and everything can be done on the fly. With predominantly, I'm going to use the example of Red Hat and Windows. When the latest of versions of their operating systems, it can be done while the machine is still online, and an end user would never realize it. You wouldn't be even able to see the difference. And so suppose I'm running out of resources, I can immediately go and in a matter of seconds literally increase CPU, increase memory, and that gives extremely flexible environments to companies so that you can optimize on resources. So suppose a good example is you're running a website and you suddenly suppose you're running a news website and there's been an earthquake or there's been a certain death or something, and you suddenly realize there's going to be a lot more traffic coming onto your website, and you require more resources, so you need more CPU, you need more memory. You can do it on the fly, while the site's being updated or while people are accessing it, and you would never come to know. Alright, but however, everything is not hunky-dory, and when it comes to reducing resources on VMs, so like suppose I have increased this, and the most prevalent problem is with disk space. Disk space, once added and once utilized, I may empty out and free out the disk space, but I cannot reduce the disk space in virtualization. Most vendors claim that it does work, but a practical scenario isn't very prevalent where actually you reduce the space in a VM. But these limitations do not exist with the virtualization software. They're more to do with the operating system, with the operating systems that are out there. They do not let you decrease the space while you're in production. So this is one drawback that is there, and it's a pretty serious drawback. If that is, it can impact you in terms where you have limited space and you need to optimize on space, so you got to be careful before increasing space. And a simple fact is that server-based virtualization helps IT managers reduce deployment from weeks and days to literal minutes. I mean, I can give a practical example where we have a template for a virtual machine which is approximately 8 GB in size, and if I need to give a VM to my application team and they want a fresh OS install, it takes me hardly 2 to 5 minutes to deploy a 6 GB VM. Of course, deployment times predominantly vary with the size of the VM. So because a VM in the background is actually a folder which is created on your storage, to explain it in bare simple terms. And so the larger the size, of course, is going to take that much longer to copy and deploy. So suppose a 100 GB VM is going to take you say 30 minutes, but traditionally speaking, I have a VM, the OS gets corrupted for some reason, which is a very common scenario. Earlier, you would have to go back, reinstall the entire OS, reinstall all the drivers, reinstall your app, reinstall all your settings,